So we have Judie Ohm here today. She has wonderfully volunteered to come in to speak with us. She is the mother of 3, grandmother of 5. She's an author, aviation enthusiast, avid gardener, antique collector, equestrian, gourmet cook, racquetball player, stained glass artist. Ooh, I'd love to see that. Okay. Wood whittler, snowshoer, cross-country skier. She's skied the Birkebeiner. Is it the Birkebeiner 10? You have an X at the end.
Oh, yes.
Okay, in Hayward, I just know it
Yes.
as the Birkebeiner, so I
Yes.
just want to make sure I
That's
credit
okay.
it correctly.
Oh, yeah, no,
In 1982, she was Miss Wisconsin Senior America in 2008. She was born and raised in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and was retired from the Mayo healthcare system. She currently resides in Mondovi, Wisconsin, so if you'll give her a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I know I have a soft voice, so I need this. Okay. Yeah. I thought it would be very nice to come down here and do a little talk and let you know about my book. And I'm wondering if there's any veterans in the crowd here. Thank you for your service. Anybody know of a veteran? Everybody. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Did anyone know Doug Ward from Mondovi?
I met him.
Oh, you did? Okay,
I
yeah.
met him in 2015.
Okay.
A couple airplanes for sale, we went and looked at them.
Oh, yeah.
Log Cabin Airport.
Yes, yeah. Okay. Well, I will go ahead and begin here. This is a new setup for me, so just bear with me, please. This is a story of the 2 high school classmates. One was a World War II P-51 pilot who became an ace youngest ace of both wars. And his name is Chris Huntsman from Mondovi. The other is a ball turret gunner on a B-17, and that would be Doug Ward. One returned and one did not. And this is the table of contents for my book. One of the things that Doug and Chris, they were co-captains of the basketball team and the football team. And they lived a block and a half away from each other, went to Mondovi grade school and high school. And if you go through Mondovi and you see the red barn on Mirror Lake, that's where Chris Huntsman grew up. And Doug was just a block and a half away. And one of the awards that Doug got was the American Legion Certificate Award. And he got that in the 8th grade, and that was the emphasis on the development of qualities of courage, honor, leadership, patriotism, scholarship, and service. So he was very, very proud to get that award. They went to grade school, high school together, and then after high school, Doug worked in the ordnance plant in Eau Claire, and they made the smaller caliber munition shells. And his fellow co-workers were getting drafted, and he knew he would get drafted, so he thought, well, I'd rather just go ahead and enlist, and then maybe that way I can get in the Air Force, which is what he wanted to get into. I'll cover the enlisting, service time, and then after the war also. Okay, these are the list of places that Doug went to, and one of them was Kessler Field, Mississippi, February 10th, 43. And how many of you remember Bob Hope? A few, okay, thank you. Yeah, well, Bob Hope, Francis Langford, and Jerry Colonna put on a show for the troops, like they always did, would go around and everything. And then Doug thought, well, this would be really great. I got to get Bob Hope's signature. So he went backstage and he told him that he was from the press. And have the autograph. I still have it today. And I have a lot of these original things, but they're in a lockbox at home. But yeah, that was pretty good. That kind of tells you about Doug's personality too, I think. Okay, and then after, let's see, they went to, there's a list of all the different places that they were stationed at, and I won't go through them, but they started out in St. Petersburg, Florida, and then they ended up in, where is it? Amarillo, Texas, yeah. So he went out to, what's the name of the place out west there? Wendover, Utah. And they were coming back from Wendover, and they were going through Colorado. They were on their troop train, and the buddy he was with said, "Oh yeah, that's where my folks owned all that land over there and farmed it." And then they came to the railroad crossing, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, there's my brothers in the pickup." And so he waved and he hollered, "Denver, Denver." And so they went home, drove to Denver, got his mom and dad, drove to Denver. And actually it was a really good thing because he was killed. That was the last time that his parents saw him. When, I'm going to interject this, in Wendover, Utah, a few years back they had a gambling junket that would go out from Eau Claire to Wendover. And Doug said, "Gee, I would really like to go out there." He said, "I'm not a gambler," and I'm not, but I went to gunnery school out there. So let's go ahead and do it. So we did. And we're walking through town, small town, and I went to the visitor center, and he started talking to the gal and said that he had done training out in the hills back up here. And she said, "Well, where are you staying? Because when I finish work at 5 o'clock, I'll come to the hotel and I'll pick you up and I'll take you out there." And it was just like unbelievable that he was able to do that. And so she did, and she took us way, way up in the hills. And you could still see the railroad tracks that they had used to do their training on, and the .50 caliber shells were on the ground too. So, of course, we picked a few of them up too, just as souvenirs. Yeah. Just quickly, these are some of the places that he was at. Then they left March 27th, 1944 for the overseas duty. And there's a list of the places that they went to. And the one stop was Casablanca. And if you ever heard of Humphrey Bogart, okay, a few yeses. And he thought, wow, this is going to be really great, Casablanca. This is going to be a good time. Well, not when you're in the service and you got to get on the plane the next day and go to another place. He was in the 15th Air Force Division, 301st Bomb Group, 419th Bomb Squadron in Foggia, Italy. And he flew in the B-17s. How he came to be a ball turret gunner was he wanted to stay with his crew because they had all trained together. And he talked to his pilot and he said, "Geez, I really want to stay with you guys." And he said, "Well, we have one position left, and that's the ball turret." And Doug said, "Oh, I'll take it." And everyone kind of looked at him and thought, good, we got that position filled. So the first, I believe it was the first time he was in the ball turret was his first mission. And he said he sat there and they said, man your guns. So he took it and started going with the .50 caliber, and he said the sweat was dripping down his face and he was getting quite nervous. But finally he was able to get the guns to work correctly. A few other things that just to throw in here, the sleeping bags and the kittens, they would take over tents that had been, the other troops had moved on. And he said one of the nights he could feel this wet thing down his back of his throat, or back of his neck. And he thought, oh my gosh. And then he realized it was a kitten. And then pretty soon another one, and down by his feet. And he said, oh my gosh, I think I got some kittens here. And one of the other guys said, well, I'll tell you what, just make them nice and comfortable for the night. Tomorrow we'll make them a home, because they're going to want to stay. Mom had her kittens, and she's not going to move them out of there. So there's just a lot of little ordinary things, so to speak, that took place too. The other thing too is they always say, well, he had to be kind of short for the ball turret. And actually he was very average. I think he was like 5'10", 5'10 and a half. But he wanted to stay with his crew, and so that's why. The other thing was they had electric heated suits, because of course it was 30 below outside. And their parachutes were always up in the fuselage. There was no room for anything down there. And he just sat on a metal plate. And he thought, well, I haven't got very much protection, but and if I have to get out, I hope I'll be able to exit on the top. They never were in the ball turret when they took off or when they landed. They would always take off, and then he would get down into the ball turret. And the same way when they were going to land, they would open up inside and he would jump out into the fuselage. Oh, one of his comments was, yeah, I didn't mind it at all. I had a great view of everything. And one time he took a camera down there with him. And a lot of the pictures in the book were the originals. I had a stack like this of negatives to take to sharp photos so I could get the pictures. And he kept taking the pictures, and then he's like, oh my gosh. Between the guns and the camera, he thought, no, I can't be doing two things. I gotta shoot guns, so he never took the camera down there again. And here you can see the list of missions and the hours. So you're sitting here nice and comfy. But he had that nice metal plate he could sit on, and many, many hours. And then sometimes it was an incomplete mission where they'd get ready to take off, and then because of weather or something they couldn't, but they would still credit them with the hours. They left Italy and went up to Shelveston, England with the 8th Air Force on May 24th, 1944, the 305th Bomb Group, 344th Bomb Squadron. And I have his diary all copied in the book too. And he said, yeah, gee, Mom, it's really great in England. All the girls can speak English and understand me, and I can understand them. That made for a happy soldier. I have the original letter from Dwight Eisenhower. He saved so many things, and they are all in the book too. But this is the one, and in his diary he writes, "This is the day everyone will remember." Okay, one of the other things that you've probably always heard about shooting flak. And if you've ever talked to anyone, they say, oh, don't give me any flak. Well, this is where it came from. And this is a piece of flak. This is a very large piece of flak. Most of the times when they'd pull them out, they were like the size of a dime. And ironically, when I was writing the book, I came through a diary, and it said, yep, today was my last mission. We came in with just 3 engines, and he said, I climbed up, and I got a souvenir of a piece of flak. And he never realized till that moment that that's when he got it, was his last mission. And we didn't realize this till we were at the Oshkosh Air Show, and this kid came over and he said, yeah, look at that, there's a year printed on it too. So I'm trying to find somewhere here there's a year, but if afterwards you want to come up and feel it, take a look at it, I treat it like gold. And yeah, pretty old too. Oh yeah, Doug got the mumps, and so he was in the hospital for a month. And oh, the other one too is on the left here. And I've actually got that on here, but we'll get to that later. And he said, watching, waiting, and wondering. This would be when the planes would come in, and they'd all take their bicycles and run out there or pedal out there and see what buddies still made it back. And as you can see too, there's the Red Cross with the ambulance on it. Yeah, all the letters were censored, and some of them I could see where they had punched a hole in it for a wording or a date or something. And Doug said, yeah, he was trying to send a message home that I'm in such and such a city, and then he would make a date, like, you know, June 3rd or something, and then they'd censor that and said, no, your code's not going to go through to your relatives at all. So he was trying real hard. And then as you can see, Doug received a jackpot of 50 letters. And he says in the book he read them over and over and over again. And he thought, boy, I'm really going to be busy now answering all these letters. But the other thing, too, is nowadays, in younger ones, you know, we have email. And so, of course, you know, in 5 minutes you can connect with somebody. And a letter just meant so much, just so much. And like he said, to get 50, that was a jackpot. Yeah. There's one of the places that they bombed, St. Lo. Yeah, here's a picture of him and a copy of his September 3rd. Today is the biggest day of my life. I flew my last mission. We bombed Ludwigshafen in Germany. It wasn't any picnic. Our plane was full of flak. When we got back, I got a big piece of flak out of number 1 engine for a souvenir. That's the one I showed you. And then you've always, how many have heard the song, The White Cliffs of Dover? Yeah, okay. Well, when they saw the White Cliffs of Dover, they knew they were headed into friendly territory. And I have to interject here too. We went to the Oshkosh air shows, and we had just finished looking at all the warbirds. And the singer was singing out on the platform, and she's singing The White Cliffs of Dover. And Doug turned to me and said, oh my gosh, that means so much to me. Oh, when we saw the White Cliffs of Dover. And so he walked up to her and he said, oh gosh, I have to tell you. And she looked at him and said, do you mind if I finish my song? And he said, no, go ahead. But then when she was finished with the song, she gave the microphone to him and then asked him a few questions. And then more questions were asked and more questions were asked. So let's go here. There's Roosevelt dies. And he had this paper also. And then, okay, the war is over. Some of the medals that Doug received was a Distinguished Flying Cross, the World War II Victory Medal, Air Medal with 4 bronze oak leaves, Carbon Shooter Pistol Sharpshooter, European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign, and the American Campaign. I have a couple of the medals, but the other medals, like I said, are in a lockbox. I didn't want to bring them all. And to continue on, people have said, how did you meet Doug? So a friend of mine was having a get-together at the White House, and Doug and I were both invited. Well, I'm talking about the White House in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, the supper club. So I saw him walk in, and there's about 30 others, and I said to my friend, gee, he's got gray hair, would you mind putting him next to me so I have someone to talk to? The others were, you know, a little younger, 30s, 40s, and so he did. He sat down next to me, and we began our conversation. And then he told me that where he lived, and he casually mentioned I have an airport, which I didn't think too much of at the time. I'm sorry, we can move this out of the way. Oh, I'm sorry. And so he said, well, would you like to come down and go cross-country skiing? I said, yeah, I would. He said, okay, well, when would you like to come? And I said, well, probably tomorrow. He was a little surprised. And I thought, well, I'm not working, so why should I wait a week? Kind of like to get to know the guy. So I went down there and walked into the log cabin, a one-room log cabin, and looked around, and well, where's the bedroom? You know, not the right question. And then I said, oh, yeah, I'll have a can of pop. So I started drinking pop. And then I said, where's the bathroom? And he said, oh, just go out that back door there and follow the boardwalk down to the outhouse. And I thought, well, I bet I can make it back to Eau Claire. So I got in the car and I started driving home, and I thought, gee, was that ever nice? He had the fire going in the fireplace, and he had candles lit, and pretty romantic. It was about 4 o'clock in January, so it was starting to get dark. And then the thought hit me, that was his source of heat and light. And in a couple years, he did get electricity. So he was able to have light switches, lamps that went on and off. Didn't have to use candles again anymore. I'll talk about Chris Hansman. You can see there the barn on Mirror Lake. And he also graduated in 1941. Enlisted aviation cadet in August of 42. And they would go back and forth when they could, and then they both went overseas, and they were happy to be overseas together. And he flew into Doug's base. Yeah, he flew into Doug's base, and when he went to leave, he did, I think it was 6 rolls in his P-51 and left. And the guy standing next to him said, Doug, I don't think you'll ever see him again. And he didn't. He was one of these that just, you know, give or H, whatever he did. And he had a bull's head painted on his P-51, which was pretty much signifying kind of personality he was. Well, he got in his plane before the paint was dry. And so on the nostrils, the red paint kind of smeared. And then when he brought it back, he said to the painter, no, 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 leave it, leave it, leave it. I like that. That's very, very good. Yep. And then Doug was going to go up and meet him at Fulmer. And he got up there and he couldn't find him anywhere. And so he went back. The next weekend he had off, and so he went up. And he found his wingman, and his wingman said, yep, sorry, he's gone. He was flying below the flak towers, and when he went to pull up, his wing caught, and he just cartwheeled up into a ball of flame. So Doug always felt very bad about that. That was his best friend. Yeah, here's a picture that Doug took when he left that time. Okay, and that's how you sat in a ball turret. One of the dates I had, he said, how would you like to go to the Oshkosh Air Show? And I said, oh yeah, I've heard a lot about it. I'd really like to go. And he said, okay. He said, we'll go. So we went over to Oshkosh. We're walking around, and in the Welcome Center, they had a ball turret set up. And he said, oh, Judy, he said, this is what I flew in, where I flew in the B-17. And I was not a history buff, and I didn't like English either. But anyway, he explained it all, and then the gal behind the counter was asking a lot of questions. She's supposed to be telling everybody about it. And then she got a lot of knowledge from him. And then pretty soon we turned around and there was about 40 people asking questions. And this gentleman came up and said, you know, I think you better write this down. And I said, well, I have no need to write it down. I hear it all the time. And he said, no, no, no. He said, look at all these people. They're hungry for it. I'm talking about you writing a book. And again, I said English wasn't a favorite subject of mine. And I just smiled at him and said, yes, I'll be happy to do that. And a year went by. We went back to Oshkosh. The fella came up and he said, Judy, have you written that book yet? And I said, no, but that'll be my New Year's resolution. So that's how the book came about. There's a picture of the log cabin that he built. All by himself. He'd walk down to the Buffalo River and he would get water for the cement, bring it back up, about a 2-block journey, bring it back up and cement for his fireplace. Oh, and then the other thing too is he asked me to go to a pancake breakfast in Strum. And I said, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. So I got there at 7:30 in the morning, and as I'm driving up, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a yellow airplane sitting out there. I'd seen them in the hangars, but this looks like we might have to get in it. So he said, yeah, he said, just hop in. He said, we'll be flying over to Strum. And I have to tell you, I never liked small airplanes. I'd been asked before to go for rides, and I always turned it down. But I thought, well, I kind of like the guy, so maybe I should get in. So showed me how to climb in, got in the front seat. The pilot sits in the back seat. And of course, I was white knuckle all the way, you know. Now I'm like, oh, how silly. But anyway, that was fun. And of course, you have to kind of say the rest is history. And then he said, gee, he wanted to build another cabin. So I said, oh? well, I like the country and I sure would like to live there if you build it. And he goes, yeah, I know. There was another guy from Mondovi who said that he would rent it if I ever built another one. So I waited a couple minutes and I said, gee, I would like to live there. I really would. Oh, you would? And I said, okay, well, drop the plans. So I got back home and grabbed a Menard's brown paper sack. And I thought, I want one big room like he had, but I want a loft large enough with a walk-in closet and a 2-car attached garage and a basement that you could walk out to the Buffalo River. And he goes, yeah, I can build that. So in January, we started going down cutting trees in the woods. And we got them all cut down and hauled up. And I was right there except for when I was working. And then we had a fella come in and frame it all up for us. And then we went up to a quarry and we hauled stone for the fireplace. And he put the fireplace all up. And I'd hand him the stones too. So that's how I came to be the neighbor girl. And it worked out real well, his and hers. And I still worked, and so I'd get up and have to leave by 7:15 in the morning. And sometimes I was doing 10-hour days, so I wouldn't get back home until 8:30 at night. And I just look over and there was no light in the cabin, so we'd see each other on the weekends. And then we'd go flying a lot. And actually, we had several events that I'll go through quickly here. We had a neighbor that was going to get married in an outdoor gazebo about 5 miles from us. And they came over and they said, gee, would it be possible that you could throw marshmallows out of the airplane the day of the wedding instead of, rice or anything? And yeah, sure, we can do that. So we actually timed it ahead of time to make sure that we would do it correctly. And so the day came and we had the little marshmallows and we put them in the sack, 3 big sacks, and it was about 90 degrees and we realized they were sticking together. So we had to pour flour in so that when we threw them out, and of course the first time I went like that, it vacuum sealed shut. So I, Doug, you got to go back around. And so I just ripped her, and just all 3 bags went out. And we saw him falling down. It was really nice. And then we landed, and I looked back at Doug, and here his face is white with flour, and he's picking up a marshmallow and eating it. And it was a good job. So then we got out of put the plane in the hangar, and then we went over to the gazebo. And they said, oh my gosh, it was perfect. Just as they were leaving the gazebo, the marshmallows came down. And we could see them all on the ground, so we felt really, really good about that. We went to other air shows, and one was the one in Duluth. And we were both in uniform, like that. And we're walking around, and pretty soon the TV cameras saw us and came over and started talking to Doug. And he's telling him a few tales about World War II and his adventures. And then he said, well, what about your friend here? And he said, oh, Judie. Yeah, she was my wing walker, but her heels kept getting in the fabric, and so I had to have her quit doing that. Cut. We went around the corner. I said, Doug, where did that come from, the wing walker? He goes, well, I thought it would make a good story, which it did. The next day we were walking around the grounds again, and people came up and said, oh, there you are. Oh, there's a wing walker. And I just smiled. I thought, no, I'm not going to tell him he lied. And then we all know about the Miracle on the Hudson. with Solly Sullenberger and the co-pilot Jeff Skiles, who is from Wisconsin. And we met him at Oshkosh also. And he was signing books in the Welcome Center right next to where we were doing a talk. So we were able to visit with him for a while too, which was really lovely. Doug went on the Freedom Honor Flight. There's a list of his medals. And, we found out that the Barnstormers were going to be coming to Eau Claire. And the fella that was in charge of it from Minnesota was a friend of ours and said, gee, do you think we could land at Log Cabin Airport the night before? And Doug said, yeah. He said, I'll have brats and sweet corn and everything for you. And so the Barnstormers did. And I think most of you know what the Barnstormers were, where they'd come in and fly over the barns and attract people and maybe give them a ride and everything. Well, they landed at Log Cabin Airport. And a couple of them were from West Virginia. One was from California. And he said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this place. He said, this is the highlight of my trip. And then the next day we went up to the Eau Claire Airport with them. And we were able to go in the parade of flight over Eau Claire. So we were flying with them at that time too. Doug was also honored at the Mondovi High School Alumni Hall of Fame. And one of the other fun times we had at Oshkosh was I got a phone call about 10 in the morning at our campsite, and they said, is Doug Ward here? I said, yeah. He said, well, we've got a fella with a P-51, and he's taking World War II veterans up for a flight. And he said, if you can be up to the Warbirds at 11 o'clock, he'll take Doug up. So we hurried and got in uniform and went up there. And the P-51 was just coming in and landing. It landed, and we were standing there. Doug was waiting to be the next passenger. And the fellow that stood up waved, and it was Diz Cronenberg from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I don't know if many of you knew Diz, but he was a teacher at the high school also, but also a belly gunner, did the exact same route that Doug did. So anyway, then he comes down, and I had run over to the reenactors and said, hey, you got to see this. Doug's going up in a P-51. And so then they all came over, and they saluted Diaz, of course. And then Doug got in the plane, and he went up, and the pilot said, well, how was it? And he said, yeah, it was really nice. He said, but I thought you might do a couple rolls for me. And he said, well, I didn't know if, you could handle it. Doug said, oh yeah, I could have handled it, yeah. And then another prestigious award he got was the France's Legion of Honor Medal. And so they had sent out forms to fill out, and if you had flown over France, for France, whatever. And so I filled out all of the necessary information. And yes, we received the announcement that he would be receiving the medal. And there's a picture of that prestigious medal. Here's one of our fly-ins that we had. He started out by inviting the neighbors over because there might be airplane activity, and he thought, I better let them know what's happening here. So the first one, he put a few hot dogs on, potato salad, and he got about 30 people and about 10 airplanes. And so then he thought, well, this was really fun, Labor Day weekend. I think I'll do it again. So actually, we did 32 years of the fly-ins. And after I met him, it was about, I forget, 20th or so. And then I got on the internet and I started contacting North Dakota, South Dakota, Michigan, Illinois, Minnesota pilots. And they're like, yep, okay, sure, we'll put it on our calendars. So the hot dogs went up to 100. And then the next year, because we ran out, I said, I better get 200 hot dogs. And I think we had 2 left. It ended up, the last year, I bought 600 hot dogs. And I think we had a dozen left. And also we had 150 airplanes come and land. And there's pictures, again, like I say, in the book of all of these activities too. But yeah, here that's just a great picture of, and there's the J3 Piper Cub, the favorite. Another time at Oshkosh, we were on one of the golf carts going around, and this lady was talking behind us, and then the gentleman next to her said, oh, hi, Doug and Judy, and we're like, oh, hi, how are you? Christian was his name. He said, oh, I want you to meet Deborah. And Christian had flown into our place several times from Minnesota. And so then he introduced us to Deborah, and Doug said, well, where are you from? And she said, oh, I'm from England. And he said, England, we're going there for a reunion next May. And she goes, oh, whereabouts? He said, Shelveston. He goes, oh, I live there. And she said, well, great, I'll pick you up at the airport. So yes, she picked us up at the airport. And Christian was a Delta captain, and he had taken 2 weeks off, one for his own pleasure and the other one to take us all around. And one of the places that Doug wanted to go was Fulmer, which is where his friend Chris Hansman was stationed. And so we went there, and we each had an American flag, and we put that in the flower pots. And the people over there just admired us so. Doug had, of course, a World War II veteran cap on. We got off the elevator, and this woman, tears just came to her eyes, and she said, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, wait a minute, I have to call the newspaper. And then the tour director is like, I'm sorry, we don't have time for that. I wish you could, but we just don't have time for it. So we had just a marvelous, marvelous reunion there. And then, oh, the one who asked me about writing a book, his name was Tom Switzer. He's a director of communications, American Foreign Service Association in Washington, D.C. And after I read his info to Doug on the way home that day, he said, gee, maybe I better write a book. He said, you know, I got a lot of stuff. I've got all the letters my mom saved, and I've got all the letters from my friend Chris Hansman. Excuse me. So he started pulling stuff out, and I just couldn't believe it. So it took me 2.5 years to write the book, and of course it was wonderful because I had him right there, and you know, he was in great shape, and put it all together. And I had it published in Eau Claire by one of the local publishers. And I sent the book to Tom, and he wrote back. He called, and he said, Judy, he said, thank you so much. And he said, you know, there were even times when I got tears in my eyes. He said, it's just a beautiful book, and I'm going to give you 5 stars on Amazon, which he did. And I no longer sell the book on Amazon, but I started selling it there too. And one of our trips we took was a cruise to Cuba. It's one and only time I believe the cruise ship pulled in there. And Doug had been in the hospital for a couple weeks before that with a heart problem, first time ever. And doctor said, no, if you want to go, you know, go. Just get up and walk around a little bit. So we did, and it was beautiful, and he was very happy he could see Cuba and all the old cars again. And we got back home on a Wednesday night, and of course, tired, and then Thursday did laundry, unpacked and everything, and went to bed early, and at 2 in the morning, he woke up and he said, gee, I kind of got pains in my chest, but I'm going to be okay. Just lay back down. It's going to be just fine. And that was his last breath. And so he passed away. The other thing was, then my girlfriend said, "You're going to come back to England." And I said, okay, this was in May after Doug had passed. I said, but I want to contact the landowner and see if I could sprinkle some of his ashes at Shelveston. And so I did, and he said, oh, that would be quite an honor. I'm, really honored to allow you to do that. So we did that, and then in October, I had a friend come over and we sprinkled the rest of his ashes at the Log Cabin Airport. So any questions you have is fine. I welcome you to come up and take a look. And I can flip these over, or you can. And if you want to take pictures or whatever. And I am selling the book. The book sells for $30 cash. And I just want to thank everybody for coming. Amen.